I have the pleasure now of saying good morning to Crystal Howell. Great to have you here with us. She is, of course, a chartered professional accountant and certified internal auditor. And so she is a lady who can give you all the advice and any advice you need on how to set your financial matters right. So we've been having a series, Crystal, on if you have a business or if you're managing your brand, how to make sure that you do the right thing to steer it in the correct direction so you see the returns.
Yes.
And along with good marketing, you also have to handle your customer complaints well.
Yes.
And they're all tied in, which was the whole point. So once you've done your investigations, because this is where we're going into what we're zeroing on today, once you've done your investigations and you know what is needed, you know what your customers require, we are going to be discussing this morning the things that you need to do post data collection. So I got the info. What do I do with it now?
Yes. So one thing that we talk about in accounts all the time is analyzing data, but data is seldom analyzed in isolation. So if I tell you that some person has grown 3 centimeters, do we know if that is good or bad? What are we comparing that to? Was this over a period of time? Did they grow from a period of 2 years ago or 5 years ago? This helps you to be able to better understand if the data you're looking at, what impact it has and how you'll be able to move forward. And it's no different to the data that you're going to be collecting from your customer complaints. So let's say that you were told you had 2 customer complaints this month. Is that good or bad? It may sound good, but what happens if you had no complaints or a history of 0 complaints? You then begin to wonder, why am I now starting to get complaints?
Yeah.
And then you can ask questions such as, were we always collecting customer complaints? Are the channels to collect these complaints now improving? Or have we done something to make customers think that something is going wrong and they're now starting to complain? Or they've gotten to the point where they're so frustrated, they've decided that they're going to take it to this level. So it can indicate whether you have a serious problem or whether you've been improving or falling short. You need to now be able to take this data and analyze it.
Could it involve going directly to the customer and asking what they would like to improve their experience, or should you have pulled that information out of them via this, maybe a survey or whatever you did?
The survey is always, I tell people, things are a work in progress. If you have a survey and you realize that based on the customer's feedback, there are things that you may have not asked that you would like to ask going forward. If you have the opportunity, yes, you can have the conversation with the customer. And I have seen that happen when sometimes you give these Google reviews and persons actually come back and say, thank you for the review. They'd like to ask a few more questions, and it helps them to be able to tailor what they would like to do going forward or to improve the same survey. So there's nothing wrong with putting something out there and improving it as you go, because we're not born perfect. We don't always know the exact right things that we'd like to ask, and getting the feedback out there helps you to be able to see what you like to do going forward.
Yeah, I'm the sort of person, I really believe in trying to be as tactful as possible in dealing with situations and trying to contain them as long as it's something that can be contained. But most people in today's world, they are going to put you on blast if it is bad, especially. I mean, some may take the time to say, hey, I had a really good experience in this place or at this situation. But most of the time, people will just put you on blast if it is bad. How do you respond to that? Do you respond to that in that space, or how do you approach it? Because I have my feelings on that too.
If you can, the best approach is to address it quickly and to not match the person with aggression, which is what a lot of people, it is difficult because you're a human being and your business has just been put on blast and you're feeling all of this anxiety, but you have to always remember that you're the professional, and in every way, you're not only being looked at by that person, but everyone that is looking at your response to that person.
Including the ones who don't say anything.
Correct. There are lots of persons who are just sitting there watching, and if they see you getting into an aggressive match with this person, they're going to think that when they do business with you and they don't get an experience that they enjoy, they're going to get that same treatment. So you have to make sure that your response, many times persons who have a negative review, they can save or turn around a lot of people's business just by the way that they respond to this complaint. So if your response to an aggressive person, I've seen this recently, the person says, we're sorry that you would have had that experience. Can you please accept such and such and such a compensation? And would you mind being able to discuss with us further how we can make your next experience better?
I like that. And it's okay to do that in the same space.
In the same space.
But try to call them into a more private space
Correct,
to have further discussion.
Exactly, because you still
Right.
want to make sure that they don't continue to trash your business in public.
Absolutely.
But the public has seen that you've given a response which addresses the person's concerns, empathizes with what they would have gone through, as opposed to blaming them for the experience. Even if you are 100% at fault, you don't ever want the customer to think that you're going to throw them under the bus publicly.
Right.
And you have all of these people now seeing that even if you do have a bad experience, this business is going to try to compensate you for that.
Okay, so you've dealt with that situation. What should you be doing to make sure that it doesn't happen again?
You have to first understand the root cause of why it happened. And there's never one particular reason. It could be that the staff that you have may have done something that was not in line with how they've been trained. So if that is the case, you need to go back to the staff, and it's not a process where you're abusing staff, but make sure your staff understand what they're supposed to do in these situations, understand why they did not follow the process, because if you don't understand, there may be a situation where the staff was actually in the right and the customer may have been abusive, but they need to then understand how to handle those situations and how to address them, because some staff may feel as though their voices aren't being heard, and they're not exactly sure how to cope with those situations. But if it gets abusive, are they allowed to go to the manager? Are they allowed to escalate? Are they expected to handle it on their own? They need to be able to understand how to manage these things going forward.
Yeah.
If it was a case where the food itself may not have been good, if it was a case of food being served or the product or the service was not good, do you need to have a conversation with the vendor to make sure that if the product is defective, you're not having a vendor to continue to supply to you products that are defective, so that you don't get that bad reputation, because no one is seeing the vendor behind the scenes. They're seeing you.
Yeah, and you don't want it to give anybody the power to pull your business down or
Exactly.
to pull your brand down. I've seen situations, online when things happen, they go viral. And I remember seeing a situation that unfolded in the U.S. Someone at a fast food restaurant, a customer actually grabbed, and her response was obviously to get
to defend
him
herself.
off of her. What do you do when people get physical or when people really get in your space? I think training
is
key.
so critical, especially if you're in an environment like that, because thankfully in Barbados, I don't think I've really ever heard of incidents outside of maybe the hotel industry where guests may get a bit handsy with the employees. But it is so important that your employees feel safe and know how to be able to handle those situations without feeling as though they're going to be blamed for something that really was outside of their control. So having them understand what they're supposed to do in those situations, who they're supposed to escalate these concerns to, having cameras in place that will help to be able to corroborate the person's story, because many times it's a he say, she say, and your employee may not always be correct, your customer may not always be correct. But being able to manage these situations is part of management's responsibility, so that no one leaves the situation feeling as though they're disadvantaged.
I have another situation, and this is just one of my things. You may not be able to answer all of it today, but often many of us will go to either a fast food restaurant or a supermarket, and there are people, or a bank. There are people who position themselves and wait there, and they're asking for things. They may want money, they may want food, and it may make customers uncomfortable, especially depending on what time of day it is. And while I can empathize with people's situations, you don't know who you can trust, whose needs are sincere. Whose responsibility is it to deal with that situation, to manage that?
It may not legally be anyone's responsibility, but you always have to think of your business and anything around it as an extension of you. So if I'm going to think about the end result, if your customer is going to feel uncomfortable coming to your establishment because there's persons out there and your security, because I know there are many businesses that instruct their security to make sure that that does not happen. If your security is not going to take care of that and persons are afraid to come to your establishment because they're bombarded, that only impacts you.
Yes. All right, we'll leave that here for today, Crystal.